again, good evening. It is a privilege for me to be here. This is the first time in Calgary, and obviously with GCF Calgary. But I have known and heard about what God is doing in GCF Calgary, because GCF South Metro and GCF Canada is somehow there's a bond that connects us together. GCF South Metro was used by the Lord to help start GCF Toronto, that eventually planted 5 other churches in Canada. And it is a joy for me to be invited here by Pastor Cliff. I met him 2 years ago in Manila. And I am currently on my sabbatical leave, 1 year sabbatical leave, ending end of May. So for the past months, from June until April, I'm just enjoying my Sabbath rest. And Pastor Blake invited me to Calgary, and I thought I would be having a rest. And I arrived Tuesday evening. Wednesday night, I have a fellowship with your church. We had a prayer meeting. Thursday with the leadership group. And last night with the group. And I tell you, I'm really at rest. All these ministries that Pastor Blake appointed me to do. But seriously, it is a joy for me to be able to interact with the church on a very personal level. I have heard testimonies on how God has used GCF Calgary to change lives of people, to transform the lives of people. And that is the essence of why you are here in this community. To bring the gospel to people so they will experience change. Our anniversary theme is taken from Jeremiah 32, verse 39, and it says here, I will give them one heart and one purpose, to worship me forever, for their own good, and for the good of all their descendants. Earlier in the offering, or rather used the NIV, it says there, I will give them singleness of heart and action. The context of this passage is that it is the Lord speaking, and He was addressing the Israelites who were in exile in Babylon. They were stubborn people, they were sinful people. Their hearts are hard. They drew away from God. God has forgiven them time and time again, but they always return to their sins. So the Lord exiled them. But while they were in exile, in this context, the Lord gave them 2 promises. The first promise is that they will be restored to the promised land. Even though they were in exile, they can put their hope in God that one day they will return to the promised land. And God did that. The second promise is that they will not only be restored to their land, they will also be restored in the relationship with God. And in these 2 promises, God gave them hope. God gave them confidence that whatever they're doing in that context, in that time, they can look forward to the future, that they will eventually be restored to God. In our Christian life, many times we have drawn away from the Lord, right? And even before we knew the Lord Jesus Christ, we have drawn ourselves so far away from the Lord. But the good thing is, no one will ever be out of reach of God's gracious hand. Just last night, hearing the testimonies of the members of GCF Calgary, it just gives me joy to know and to hear firsthand how God has been using GCF Calgary to bring people into His kingdom. Praise God for that. You praise God for that. I mean, you praise God for that. That is the essence why we are here, right? That is our mission. So that wherever the Lord brings us, whatever you are doing in life, I hope and pray that God will give you that singleness of heart and purpose. And then in this verse, there is a promise from the Lord. He said, I will give them one heart and one purpose, to worship me forever, for their own good, and for the good of all their descendants. Or, in another translation, for their own good and the good of their children after them. Now, praise God for your children's ministry. Now, for the past 7 years, we have seen a glimpse on what God is doing in the next generation of GCF Calgary. Let's praise the Lord for that again. We need to keep the singleness of heart and purpose as a church. Even the Lord Jesus Christ, in John 17, He prayed, referring to the future believers, which is us. The Lord Jesus Christ prayed for the church that they will be one. He said that they may all be one, just as you, Father, are in me and I in you, that they also may be in us, so that the world may believe that you have sent me. Jeremiah 32:39 is not only addressed to the Israelites, but the concept was brought to the New Testament, that the church should also have one single purpose and one heart. And that is to proclaim the gospel, so that the world may believe that God the Father sent the Lord Jesus Christ. And then in Acts chapter 4:32, the same is evident. The full number of those who believe were of one heart and one soul. And that will be my prayer for GCF Calgary. That you will have that singleness of heart and singleness of purpose, keeping the Great Commission before you. That is the essence of our church life. We do not need to reinvent our mission. It was given clearly by the Lord Jesus Christ to make disciples. And as we make disciples, we are creating worshipers for the Lord Jesus Christ. And it is a very good opportunity for us, especially for you, to gather here Saturday after Saturday, recognizing the holy presence of God. I was moved and touched by the songs that we sang earlier. Be reminded that God is here, right? If I can only sing, I will sing that, but I will not. Our late senior pastor has told me when he was still alive, Lito, don't ever sing. You just preach. You sing, I will rise from the grave. So when he was still alive, it will not happen. But when he's already gone 7 years ago. And he's very instrumental in why GCF Calgary is here. But seriously, we need to keep our mission before us, to make disciples, so that we can join the Lord in creating worshipers for Him. It will be for our good, and it will be for the good of the next generation. In the next 10 years, as you look forward to what God will do for you, the fundamental question that we need to wrestle with is not, are you ready? Are you ready for the next 10 years on what God has in store for you? I'm confident that God will do great things in GCF Calgary. With what I have witnessed in the past couple of days, lives being transformed, and your passion for God and His Word, I'm confident that God will do greater things for, in, and through GCF Calgary. Do you believe that? Right? Because this is God's church, right? Jesus Christ is the author of this church. He is the builder of this church. He is the cornerstone of this church. But the question that we need to ask ourselves this evening is, are you rooted? Not really are you ready, but are you rooted? I'd like to pause for a while and show this video. I got hold of this video 4 years ago, but this made an impact in my life and in the life of GCF South Metro. And I hope that this will also challenge GCF Calgary as you look forward to the next 10 years. You're losing us.
No podemos comer coreo. You're losing us.
Ви нам допоможете?
Только 우리 이름 먹으면 안 돼. Don't leave us.
If you want to make a difference in the next 10 years, you need to have that singleness of heart and purpose in the Great Commission. If you want to make a difference in the next 10 years, you cannot afford to be just sitting on the sidelines of our church, of your church. You need to actively join your pastors in making disciples. If you have your Bibles with you, I want you to mark Matthew 28:19. In that verse, there's only one command. It says there, "Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you, and behold, I am with you always to the end of the age." If you are in Matthew 28, verse 19, I want you to mark that phrase, "make disciples." That is the singleness of purpose and heart that you need to have in your life. That is a command for every believer. That is not a command for special people, for pastors, elders, and deacons. That is a command for every one of us. And as you keep that as your single purpose and heart in your Christian life, being part of GCF Calgary, or you're visiting whatever church you are involved in, I pray that God will keep that in your heart, that you have the responsibility to make disciples. There are two things we need to understand about discipleship. First of all, it is costly. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, in his book, The Cost of Discipleship, was written 70 years ago. He said, "Cheap grace is the greatest enemy of the church. It is the grace we bestow upon ourselves. It is the preaching of forgiveness without requiring repentance, baptism without church discipline, communion without confession, absolution without personal confession. Cheap grace is grace without discipleship, grace without the cross, and grace without Jesus Christ living and incarnate." He contrasted what real and true grace is, and he said real and true grace is costly grace. It is what the Lord Jesus Christ is saying when he said, "If anyone would come after me, let him deny himself and take up his own cross and follow me." In our postmodern era, the crisis of discipleship in churches has multiplied exponentially. There is radical individualism instead of radical discipleship. Unfortunately, in our present times, everyone and anyone can decide what he or she wants to believe and not believe. We live in a culture wherein many believers choose which parts of the scripture they will obey or not. And our disobedience and even indifference to the Word of God weakens the foundation of our faith. And disobedience and indifference to God's Word leads to having shallow lives. And if we have shallow lives as a believer, we are easily shaken and shattered. We are easily shaken and shattered because we stand on the wrong foundation instead of being rooted in God's Word. Many times our life, we find fulfillment in life based on our affluence, what we own in life, based on our accomplishments, what we can do or what we have done, based on our appearance and how we look. Many times we put the foundation of our life in these temporal things. And if the Lord will remove many of these temporal things, we are shattered and shaken in life. So what we need to do is to stand on a strong foundation. That one foundation is the Word of God. God's Word is the foundation in which GCF Calgary was established 7 years ago. And I know that with the leadership of Pastor Cliff and Pastor Alan, GCF Calgary will remain standing on a strong foundation. You're blessed with two wonderful pastors and your staff here in GCF Calgary. I can say that because God showed me somehow a glimpse of the fruit of their labor. And you are on the right track. You are on the right track. But we cannot be complacent. As I mentioned the past couple of nights, God is transforming us, molding us in the likeness of the Lord Jesus Christ. God is not yet done with me. God's still molding me, even though I'm already a 27-year-old Christian. And that transformation, I know, will continue until I reach 88, right? You know that story, for some of you. But seriously, we need to keep in mind that God is transforming us so that when people observe us, they will be drawn to the Lord Jesus Christ. As we keep that singleness of purpose and heart to take part in the Great Commission. I know that almost all of you here, if not all of you, came to Canada so that you will have a better life, family life. And there's nothing wrong with that. I have been a pastor in Dallas for 4 years, in 01 to 05. And I know that God has placed you in this region, in this country, for a specific purpose. And God will do what is good and best for you. But we also need to keep in mind that God's primary purpose for each one of us, whether you are visiting here, whether you are a PR here, whether you are a citizen here, or whether, just like me, living in the Philippines, or those in Toronto, or those in Dallas, as a believer, all of us should have that singleness of purpose that God called us and saved us so that He can take part in the building up of His kingdom. That should be the center of our life, and all the things that we are doing in this temporal world should be anchored in that. And remember, discipleship is costly. It will not happen automatically. We really need to be rooted in God's Word. Second, discipleship is not only costly, it is also difficult. And that will bring us to our passage this evening. In 2 Timothy chapter 3, verse 1, Paul, addressing Timothy, he said, "But understand this, that in the last days there will come times of difficulty." This is Paul addressing a very young minister of the gospel. It's as if he is saying to Timothy, hey young man, Christian life will not be a walk in the park. It will be challenging. It will be difficult. So you need to be prepared for this. He said, understand this, that in the last days there will come times of difficulty. And then, in the next verses, he gave the reason why he said there will come times of difficulty. In verse 2, he said, "For people will be lovers of self, lovers of money, proud, arrogant, abusive, disobedient to their parents, ungrateful, unholy, heartless, unappeasable, slanderous, without self-control, brutal, not loving good, treacherous, reckless, swollen in conceit, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God." As I was reading through this, I'm thinking, is Paul thinking about my life? Is Paul thinking about the members of GCF South Metro? Is Paul thinking about the current society? No. Paul was addressing the believers in Ephesus. And 70 years ago, I believe that one Hofer also experienced this during this time. The world is discipling us. We need to be aware of that. Many of the things that was listed here, somehow, I have committed that, just to be honest with you. But praise God that the Lord has been convicted me time and time again. As the Lord has convicted me, the Lord has been molding me and transforming me. But it's important for us to be conscious that this world is influencing us. It's not only discipling us, but more importantly, we need to understand, if you have children, that this world will have a very, very big influence on their perspective in life. And I'm glad that you have a strong children's ministry, but my exhortation to the parents is that it is not the primary responsibility of the church to disciple their children. They will do everything they can to help you, but as parents, it is our responsibility to disciple our children. It is unfortunate that sometimes, as believers, as Paul mentioned in verse 6, we have the appearance of godliness, but denying its power. We know that the Holy Spirit is present in us the moment we believe in the gospel of the Lord Jesus Christ. But many times, the way we conduct ourselves, Monday to Friday is very much different during the weekend when we are with our church family. Or it is also different when we are in our growth group. I have experienced that. I have been there. I have done that because I was in the business field for 10 years before leading God's call to the ministry. And this is a reminder for us that we really need to take care of our being, because how we live our life influences how people around us view the Lord Jesus Christ. And there are three critical concerns confronting churches today. The first one is self-absorption leading to a crisis of identity. What do I mean by this? We are very much preoccupied with our own emotions, and our own situations. And we find our identity in the wrong places, in our affluence, in our appearance, in our abilities, our accomplishment, and even our acquaintances. We live in a narcissistic culture of self-love. And many are lovers of self, few are true lovers of God. The paradox of life is this: the more preoccupied we are with ourselves, the more we lose our sense of identity. Yet conversely, the closer we draw to God, the more we find ourselves and discover our true identity. The second is spiritual consumerism that leads to a crisis of authority. Now, there are three defining features of consumerism. The first one is that it enthrones our rights. It teaches us that customer is always right? When we go to a restaurant and we're expecting our food to be served the way we want it to be, but when it comes somewhat differently, what do? We ask for a replacement, right? Or we complain, right? Why? Because the customer is always right. There's nothing wrong with that. But as a believer, of course, we need to express ourselves in a right way. I'm not saying that we should not. No, I'm just saying that this defining feature of consumerism has an impact in the way we see things. Second, it exerts our choices. It means that, as a consumer, the advertisements gives us a lot of varieties and options. Right? If you want a car, just go to a car dealer and you will have hundreds of choices, right? You even go to CarMax, you don't even need to travel to the dealer. Just go to CarMax in the US and you will just have a variety of options. Now, even in other, in the Android or in your even iPhone, you have a lot of choices, right? So, these marketing companies gives us a lot of options to choose from. And then third, it enlarges our wants. We think that acquiring more things will satisfy our appetites, will give us more fulfillment. Unfortunately, it is not true. Because the more you acquire more things, it just expands your wants. And you even justify that your want is your need. Right? Now, this consumerism, the features of consumerism, unfortunately, creeps into the church. Sometimes when we go to a worship service, we always have that perspective that, okay, Lord, what can I get from this worship service? What can I get out from this preacher? And we are so complacent. We know our service is 5. Anyway, the Lord can wait. I can arrive 5:15. It's okay. At least benediction is still at the end. That is a problem in GCF South Metro. That is a problem in many churches. I'm not sure if it is an issue with GCF Calgary. But my point is, when we come to church, we need to have that perspective that worshiping God is a privilege. When we gather here Saturday after Saturday, we are gathering here not to be entertained by the praise and worship, not to be amazed by the preaching, but to just experience the presence of a holy, holy, and holy God. That's why the first song that we sang earlier, that is a very good reminder for us why we are here. We are here to worship a holy God. And it is a privilege for you and me to have to gather to be part of this worship service. Of course, I'm sure the leadership of this church wants you to go out of this place blessed every Sunday, every Saturday. It is their responsibility. And I know that they are doing everything they can to prepare your hearts to respond to God's Word as you worship Him together. But for me, that is only a blessing, an icing on the cake.
You are here primarily to worship and come before a holy, holy, holy God. And if we recognize that we are before a holy God, there's no other appropriate response for us except to be changed and transformed. And take to heart God's message to us and apply it in your life. Sometimes we also choose preachers. Now, I have experience in other churches. It's not true in GCF Calgary. You know that a person will attend a church because he loves to hear his preacher. And in his home church, when a preacher that doesn't like schedule to preach, he will schedule another visit to another church. It happens. Unfortunately, that is not the right perspective. For me as a pastor, even if my associate pastors will preach in GCF South Metro, I will always stay there for the 3 services. Because I know that whoever is preaching the Word of God was appointed by God to deliver the message. We should not compare one preacher to the other. But our focus should be, Lord, what is your message for me through this preacher? May you open my heart and my mind and give me the courage to receive your word and apply it in my life so that I can glorify you. So that when I go back to my workplace, I will apply that to my life. And the way I live my life, I hope and pray that I will be faithful to that singleness of purpose of making disciples. The preachers have the responsibility to prepare. Okay? We are accountable to God. God will make us accountable every time that we stand and proclaim the Word of God. But your responsibility is to discern God's message for you at that moment. So, moving from one church to the other because there is something that you want is not right. I also heard testimonies yesterday about a number of people knowing the Lord Jesus Christ in GCF Calgary. That's really wonderful. It gives joy to your pastors. And my prayer is that the Lord will really give you that conviction to stay committed in GCF Calgary. Not because of what the church has done for you. You need to look beyond that. But because of what the Lord Jesus Christ has done for you. Jesus Christ is the head of GCF Calgary. And I was joking your leaders yesterday. I hope and pray that in my next sabbatical leave, that will be 2024. Pastor Cliff will also invite me again, but not do anything. But I will still see all of you. You are all very young. Others are young at heart. That's my prayer for you. But also in church life, we know that there will also come a time that a person needs to move to another church for valid reasons. That also happens. But ideally, you stay in one church because of the Lord Jesus Christ. Now, the third crisis that we face today is stagnant spirituality leading to a crisis of transformation. As I mentioned, I have been a Christian for 27 years. In my first 7 years as a believer, I can say that my growth is really very slow, none at all. I was running away from God. I'm doing a lot of foolish things. And I did not experience growth. But by God's grace, the Lord used some leaders of the church to disciple me. So I started as a believer who is a pew-sitter. I just go to church Sunday after Sunday, bringing my family. I was so much focused on the business, and I said to myself, Lord, this is the only thing I can do for you. From Monday to Friday, that we live my life. Sunday, I'll make a deal with you. I'll bring my family. It becomes an obligation for me. After 7 years, the Lord, just pushed me and allowed me to experience some transformation and gave me the courage to be part of the ushering ministry. I eventually became the head usher. I became a Bible study leader. I became a deacon of the church. And that was a privilege that God has given to me. But even during those times that I was serving in the leadership, God has been molding me and transforming me. And at times shaking me to get my attention. Until in 2000, the Lord called me to full-time ministry. And I leave that business to serve the Lord full-time. And for the past 17 years, I have been serving the Lord. But even though I'm already a pastor, serving the church for the past 15 or 16 years, God is still molding me and transforming me, chipping away the rough edges of my life. And I know that God wants me to experience transformation moment by moment until I appear before the Lord Jesus Christ. And that is the way that God deals with our Christians, that God saved us in the past. God saved us in the past. He secured our future, but in between, He is sanctifying us. He is transforming us. So every time that you will celebrate or remember your spiritual birthday, or even every time that GCF Calgary will celebrate your anniversary, it is always good to ask ourselves, Lord, for the past year, how much have I grown? We need to be intentional in searching our hearts. Otherwise, we will just go through the motions of doing church. I may be serving the Lord as a head usher week after week, giving my best to the Lord. But every time after the worship services, after I go home at night, it's very much possible that I'm not experiencing change. I may be leading a Bible study group, studying the Word of God, week after week, and leading the Bible study group, and when I go home, I'm not experiencing change. If we will not experience transformation, our spirituality will be stagnant. Even if we are so busy doing church work, it is very possible that we are not experiencing transformation. Work should follow our worship. Our doing should be an overflow of our being. There's so much to learn about discipleship, but since I only have one chance to speak to you about this during this season, the life of GCF Calgary, I want to focus on the role of God's Word in our transformation. In verse 10 of chapter 3, the Apostle Paul said, "You, however, have followed my teaching, my conduct, my daily life, my faith, my patience, my love, my steadfastness, my persecution and sufferings that happened to me at Antioch, at Iconium, and at Lystra, which persecutions I endured, yet from them all the Lord has rescued me. He said in verse 10, you, however, he contrasted Timothy to two gentlemen, Jannes and Jambres, who opposed Moses. Who opposed God's word, who corrupted the mind of people. He said, instead of you being like that, you need to follow my example. And then he referred to verse 16 about the role of the Scripture. He said, all Scripture is breathed out by God and profitable for teaching, for reproof, for correction, and for training in righteousness, that the man of God may be complete, equipped for every good work. So as Paul exhorted Timothy to follow his example, a few verses after, he highlighted the important role of God's Word in his life. He said God's Word is breathed out by God. It means it has a divine origin. And because it has a divine origin, it gives us authority. It is the authority of our life. And then he said, and it is profitable. It means that God's Word is beneficial on how we live our life. Specifically, he said, for teaching, for reproof, for correction, and for training in righteousness. So he said, he emphasized the value of God's Word. Pertaining to God's Word, we know that God's Word is God's truth, right? But one thing I learned about discipleship and His Word is this. Truth doesn't change lives. Truth applied changes lives. Did you catch that? Truth doesn't change lives. Truth applied changes lives. The Lord has given me the privilege to finish my masteral program in theology and doctoral ministry. But in 2010, when I received the diploma of my doctoral ministry, the Lord clearly impressed in my heart this reality. That the more I learned about God and His Word, the more I realized there's so much I do not know about God's Word. And in fact, it really doesn't matter how much I know about the Word of God if I'm not applying it in my life. So the challenge for us, if we really want to keep that singleness of focus and purpose in our life to make disciples, of course, it is good for you to know how, the essence of the gospel, to share it verbally. That is important. But what is more important, if we are to make disciples, is that we must live out the truth of God. In GCF South Metro, I always encourage people to make disciples. And some of them are so afraid because they do not know so much about the Word of God. And I always encourage them by saying, you know what? It really doesn't matter to me how much you know about the Word of God. What is important for me is that whatever you know about God's Word, you apply it in your life. And whatever you know about God and His Word that you apply in your life, you teach it to the person that you are discipling. That will bring change in your life. That will bring change in the life of your disciple. Because sometimes we don't engage in discipleship because we do not know how. Even if I'm already a pastor, there's so much questions about discipleship that I'm still wrestling with. But the basic thing for me is to be rooted in the Word of God. Look at verse 14. But as for you, continue in what you have learned and firmly believe, knowing from whom you learned it, and how from childhood you have been acquainted with the sacred writings, which are able to make you wise for salvation through faith in Christ Jesus. Mark that word, continue. It is a process. It is a lifelong process of spending time in the Word of God, reflecting on it. But the most important thing is applying it in our life. So if you're wondering, okay, Pastor, can I be involved in discipleship now? I'll tell you, yes, you can. And Pastor Chris will be very happy. As he disciples you, you will disciple other people that God brings in your life. And I want to leave you this material that you can use. If you're wondering what material I can use God's Word. You don't need a seminary training before you can share God's Word, right? We need to follow the example of Ezra. In Ezra chapter 7, verse 10. For Ezra had set his heart to study the law of the Lord and to do it, and to teach his statutes and rules in Israel. The first thing, he set his heart. I pray that this evening, God will give that passion in your heart to study God's Word, to hunger for the Word of God. And then, if you hunger for the Word of God, if you sincerely want to grow in the Word of God, I am confident that God will give you the time to study the Word of God. So set your heart and then study the Word of God. After studying the Word of God, you need to submit yourself to the Word of God. It means that whatever the Lord revealed to you, any sin that you need to confess, any attitude that you need to change, you need to submit to God's Word. And then, do not stop there. Do not stop there. This is where discipleship will come. You share it with someone. As you set your heart to God's Word, you study it, you submit to it, and then you share it to someone. Wow! I'm sure God will give you the joy. Pastor, to whom will I share it? If you have a spouse, share it to your spouse. If you have kids, share it to your kids. No? If you are praying for someone that you want to spend the rest of your life with, and just like Nick, he prayed, Lord, I submit myself to just bring me to the right person. I'm just kidding. But you share it with someone. That will make a difference in your life. That will make you rooted in God's Word. Again, going back to 2 Timothy, he said, refer to the scripture, when you do all these things, you will be complete and equipped for every good work. And I want to leave you with this, that whatever you're going through in life, whatever challenges you're facing, finances, you're still praying for a job for you have health issues, you have relationship problems, as you commit yourselves to get rooted in God's Word, God will deliver you. God will rescue you. In verse 10, Paul said, as he reminded Timothy how he followed his teaching, his conduct, his aim in life, his faith, his patience, his love, his steadfastness, his persecutions and sufferings, which he endured, yet from all of these things, the Lord has rescued you. And I'm sure that as you commit yourselves to get rooted in God's Word, the Lord will deliver you. You may be shaken in life, but not greatly shaken to the point of giving up. Because the Lord will give you the strength and will deliver you. Father God, we thank you for your Word. We thank you for reminding us that as a church, as a member of this church, you want us to have that singleness of purpose and heart. And thank you, Lord, for the challenge that you've given to us, that to get rooted in your word so that we can make a difference in this community for the building up of your kingdom and the glory of your name. I pray, Father, for each and every person present here. You know, Father, there are different situations in life, the pressures that they need to contend, the problems that they need to face, and the predicament that they are in, whether pertaining to relationships with loved ones, in their workplaces, and even, Lord, with health issues. I ask, Father, that you will grant them the grace to put their faith in you, that you will see them through. They may be shaken, but affirm them, Father, that you will not allow them to be greatly shaken to the point of giving up or crashing down in their life as they commit themselves to get rooted in your word. Thank you, Father, for the Lord Jesus Christ, whom you have given to pay for all the penalties of our sin. May you remind us, Father, that with Jesus Christ in our life, that will be enough. That will be enough reason for us to join this church in fulfilling that one purpose, to make disciples in the building up of your kingdom and the glory of your name. I ask, Father, for your blessing upon this wonderful church family as they commit themselves to the Lord Jesus Christ.